Hello, Alabama. Hi. I can't believe I'm here. I'm so excited. I'm so honored. And I want to thank Teresa and Carrie and Amanda for having me here to Birmingham/Hoover. I do know the mayor of Hoover, Frank. Frank and I are old friends. Frank's daughter came to the very last Elin Hilderbrand bucket list weekend in Nantucket, and she said, "My dad is the mayor of Hoover." I mean, what are the chances? It was so great. This is my fourth time in the state. I took in the fall of 2017. I took my son Maxwell to tour Auburn. I know only half of you are clapping. I signed in Fairhope, in a town that I know is pronounced Mobile, near Mobile, at Page and Palette. And this past fall, I went to Muscle Shoals. How about that? And I signed I did an event at the Sheffield Library. So this is my fourth time in Alabama, which is not bad, considering. And I love that I've been invited to speak at something called Southern Voices when I'm literally from the Northeast, like born and bred. I just think it's so much fun. I do have like some Southern cred. You know, my son ended up going to the University of South Carolina. Go Gamecocks. And in college, you know, I taught at Duke. I say I taught at Duke. I didn't teach at Duke. I was a camp counselor. They had a young writers camp. They had a young writers camp at Duke. And for 2 summers in college, I was a counselor at the camp. And then 2 summers a little bit later, when I was out of college, I taught a class at the camp. This is before I was ever published. They had a lot of faith in me, which I was very grateful for. I'm also a dear friend of the writer Dorothea Benton Frank. She was my Southern sister, and we had this great idea that we were gonna do like a Northern Southern cooking show called Cooking the Books, and we were going to invite like a third writer, like we were going to have Stephen King come on at Halloween, and we were going to like do that cooking show, and it was my dream. But she passed in 2019, and I miss her every day. So in Dottie's spirit, I am here with you guys. What else do I have to say? I am going to talk a little bit about why beach books matter. It may seem... You know, today is a sort of quasi-somber day because it is the 1-year anniversary of Russia invading the Ukraine. And it's like, why do beach books matter? And that's what I'm going to hope to talk about today. So I'm going to tell a little bit about my journey, which is as follows. I was raised in a blended family of 5 children. And every summer, my father and my stepmother would take us for the month of July to Cape Cod. So for those of you whose New England geography maybe isn't perfect, Cape Cod is like a peninsula that sticks off the coast of Massachusetts. And we rented a ramshackle cottage that was on a sandy lane that led to the beach. The cottage had a screened-in porch that was sort of falling off the side. It had sand between the floorboards. It had furniture that looked and smelled like it had been sat on in wet bathing suits for 50 years. And we had all of these rules that we had to follow when we were at the Cape House. We were not allowed to shower inside. We had to use the outdoor shower. We were not allowed to eat inside. We took breakfast, lunch, and dinner on the back deck underneath the umbrella at the picnic table. If it was sunny, it was a beach day, and the 5 of us would sling our towels around our necks and march down the sandy lane to the beach, where we would proceed to sit for 8 hours. My parents used to slather us with Coppertone number 4. That was a foam. And at the end of the day, we would come back. We would be radioactively glowing. And my grandmother used to say, "You all look so healthy." We used to go down to the beach every night and watch the sunset like it was a Broadway show. We would go early and get our seats. The sun would go down. We'd clap. And then after sunset, we would go home and have dinner, and that would either be grilled out back or we would go out for fried clams, soft serve ice cream. We would play miniature golf. Twice during the summer, my father would wake us up in the middle of the night. And the first time he woke us up, he would walk us down to the beach in our pajamas so that we could look at the stars. And the second time he woke us up, he would light the candles in the dining room and we would play midnight Uno. It was an idyllic way to grow up by anyone's standards. And then in the November following my 16th summer, my father was killed in a plane crash. And those summers came to an end. My 17th summer, I had to get a job, and I worked in a factory that made Halloween costumes. So it was 1986, and I spent 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, either stapling clown hats to cardboard forms, assembling ghoul kits. Ghoul kits were like the fake glow-in-the-dark teeth, the fake blood, and the white face paint. Or I folded Rambo headbands. And as I was doing this, bemoaning my reversal of fortune, I thought to myself, I don't care what I do with my life, but I need a way to spend every summer at the beach. And I'm going to find a way to spend every summer at the beach. So I went to college. I attended the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. And as many of you know, Johns Hopkins is famous for its pre-med program, scientists, engineering. My roommate was a biomedical engineer. A lot of my friends were taking molecular, cellular biology and organic chemistry. And I was a creative writing major. So my job was to go to the bar and save the seats every night. I was finished studying first, off I would go, save the seats at the bar till everybody else got there. At the end of 4 years, I knew I wanted to be a writer, and I went to my professor, a man named Madison Smart Bell, and I said to him, I want to be a writer. What do I do? Do I get a job? Do I go to graduate school? And he said to me, Ellen, if you want to be a writer, you need to go out in the world and live so that you have something to write about, which was excellent, excellent advice. I moved to New York City, and I got a job in publishing. But I thought, okay, yeah, I want to be a writer. I'll go into publishing. No, wrong, opposite, wrong. I lasted 9 months, completely miserable. Realized that to be a writer, what I really needed was time. So I thought, okay, I'll teach, and then I'll have my summers off. So I got a job teaching at IS 227 in Queens, New York. It took 3 subways to get there and a bus. Super challenging. And then the second year I got a job teaching in Westchester County, which is north of the city. And I lived in Manhattan, and I would commute backwards. So I would go out to the suburbs in the morning and come back to the city in the evenings. And the summer between those 2 school years, I had free. I thought, now is my chance. I'm going to go to the beach. So I had grown up on the Cape, and I had been to Martha's Vineyard in college. And the third point on that particular triangle is Nantucket. I thought, I'm going to go spend the summer on Nantucket. So I sublet my apartment in New York, and I thought, okay, I need to find a place to live in Nantucket. So it's 1993. I call information. I get the number of the newspaper. I call the newspaper, said, can you please send me the classifieds in the mail? 6 days later, the classifieds arrive. I'm circling, places from my landline. I'm calling long distance, calling to see, can I get a room in a house? So I found a room in a house with 3 other roommates, and I proceeded to have the best summer of my entire life. I like to paraphrase John Denver and say that when the ferry pulled into the harbor, it was like coming home to a place I'd never been before. I fell madly in love that summer with Nantucket. And I left New York permanently, and I moved to Nantucket. I went back, taught the second school year, and then I moved to Nantucket permanently in 1994. And I worked a bunch of weird seasonal jobs. So I substitute taught. I worked at the Inquirer-Mirror, which was the paper I called initially, as the classifieds person, by which I mean people used to call the newspaper and, give me the ads, and I would write them down. and then put them in the computer, the computer such as it was later. And I did that job. And in the off seasons, I would travel. And so the first off season that I traveled, I went through Southeast Asia. I went to Nepal. I went to Australia, New Zealand, Fiji. And then the second winter that I traveled, and I'm backpacking here, you guys. I mean, I have like a pack on my back and no money. I went to Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Ecuador. I went to the Galapagos, and I went to Costa Rica before it was cool. And then, feeling like I had sufficiently gone out and lived, I decided I was going to apply to graduate school. So I applied to graduate school, and I was miraculously admitted to the University of Iowa Writers' Workshop, which is the most esteemed, most elite writing school in the country. So I get out to Iowa, and I'm completely miserable. I mean, has anyone ever been there? I mean, it's like cornfields. I spoke last Thursday night in Iowa, so I was super careful what I said at that point. I feel I'll be less careful tonight, but it's cornfields and pig farms and Big Ten football and not a body of water in sight. And I was a literal fish out of water. I was totally miserable. The program I was in was super competitive, and everybody was sort of cutthroat and backstabby. And one professor in particular, who was the director of the program, Frank Conroy, hated my work. Told me I would never be published. Frank. But thankfully, the university had free therapy. So every week, I would go to free therapy, cry, say how much I miss Nantucket. And the therapist said, after weeks of me doing this, well, I hope it's obvious what you need to do. And I sort of thought she was telling me maybe I should quit and go home, which I thought was weird. Like, our therapist is supposed to tell you that. And she said, you need to start writing about Nantucket. And so I did. I started writing my first novel, The Beach Club. In my very last workshop at Iowa, my professor had his agent in the class from New York. And the agent said, which one of you lives on Nantucket? It was very obvious it was me. I think I was wearing a sarong. I mean, I never looked like everybody else at Iowa anyway. I was like, oh, that's me. And he said, please stay and see me after class. And you guys, I didn't even want to stay and see him after class because I had my U-Haul packed and I was ready to go back east. But thank goodness I did, because Michael Carlisle has been my agent this year for 25 years. And agent-author relationships are like marriages. Half of them end in divorce. But thankfully, Michael and I are going to be celebrating our silver anniversary. And since I'm divorced, it's the longest relationship that I've ever had with a man. So when I met him, he said, what are you working on? And I said, I'm writing a novel about Nantucket. And he said, that he had grown up summers on Nantucket on Main Street at a very fancy address. And he said, when you are finished with the book, please send it to me. So that was in May of 1998. And in January of 1999, I finished The Beach Club and I sent it to him. I printed it, put it in a box, and mailed it to New York. Okay, we no longer do it that way, you guys, either. So, hold on, I'm going to take a sip of water. Hold on. This is going to be a do-si-do here. Hold on. Okay, so he gets the manuscript and he sends it out. At that time, there are 13 publishers in New York. He sends it to all 13 publishers. He gets 12 rejections, and he's kept the rejection letters. He occasionally will like to read them to me, so I don't get an inflated sense of self-worth. And the 13th publisher said, we'd like to make you an offer for the novel, and the offer is $5,000. And I said to him, is $5,000 a lot of money? Because I can't quit my job. And he's like, well, it's the only offer we have, so we're going to go ahead and take it. So we take the $5,000, and The Beach Club is published in the summer of 2000. And People magazine chooses it as Beach Book of the Week, which is so amazing. I mean, I can't even imagine how amazing it is. But my publisher had only printed 2,500 copies of the Beach Club. And this is the year 2000. This is before the Nook, before the Kindle, before anyone has an iPhone. So if you want to go buy a book in the year 2000, you actually have to go to the bookstore. I mean, can you imagine? You have to go to the bookstore. So they run out of copies. Very frustrating. It takes 3 weeks to get them back in print. And despite this, the Beach Club sells pretty well. And my publisher offers me a 2-book deal for Nantucket Nights and Summer People. Well, Nantucket Nights comes out in 2002. It doesn't get the big splash publicity of my first novel, and then Summer People does even worse. Despite this, St. Martin's, my publisher, gives me a 2-book deal for my novel, The Blue Bistro, and my novel, The Love Season. Now, has anyone here read The Blue Bistro? Okay, so people are clapping. That is, in fact, my favorite book. It sold terribly. It sold so badly. And I was so discouraged, and there was a lot of crying. When St. Martin's used to send me out on tour, especially with the Blue Bistro, I had a baby. I had 2 babies. I had a toddler and an infant, my boys. And when they sent me out on tour, I had to pay for everything myself. I had to pay for the plane trip off island, rent a car. I had to take Dawson with me because I was nursing. And, he was in the bucket. I would go to the bookstore, and there would be like 3 people there. And this is an improvement, anyway. 3 people there. And it was really demoralizing, and I would cry. And then for the Love Season, the next year when the Love Season came out, I thought to myself, I'm going to do something. So I hired a publicist with my own money, and the publicist did a great job. And she got People Magazine again with my picture. The book had 5 stars. And I was so excited. And again, my publisher ran out of copies. They had published 7,500 copies. They ran out. And I was so frustrated. And at that point, I was sitting on a novel called Barefoot. And my same agent said, I think maybe we should shop this one around. And I didn't want to do that because I had Stockholm Syndrome and I was in love with my captor. I wanted to stay, but thankfully he persuaded me. And in September of 2006, we did what I called my Cinderella Day. We went to New York. At that point, there were 10 publishers in New York. All of them wanted to buy Barefoot, and I ended up selling Barefoot to a different publisher, Little Brown, and they proceeded to turn the next 23 books into New York Times bestsellers. Thank you. Which was amazing. And it wasn't that the books were any better, it was that they were just published correctly. And it was really very refreshing for me. It was not instant success. It took me until my 23rd novel to get to number 1. If you can imagine, trying 23 times. And it was so like every year, like in later years, like in 17 and 18, I got to number 2. And one year I was behind John Grisham, and one year I was behind James Patterson and Bill Clinton. And I thought, I'm just never gonna beat these guys. And then in 2019, my 23rd book, Summer of '69, the person I had to beat, I thought, okay, this is my year, right? This is when it's gonna happen. And the person I had to beat was Delia Owens, Where the Crawdads Sang. She had been number 1 for 49 weeks. 49 weeks. I said to my editor, am I going to be able to do this? And I did. I beat her the week I came out. 1 week, I got to number 1 on both lists. And it was very satisfying, I'll tell you that. Not only because, it was, that Little Brown had built my career, book by book, summer by summer, year by year. So it was like this very steady march up the hill, but also the juxtaposition between a person who wrote a novel that went straight to number 1 and then me who'd been with this heavy backpack on, year after year. It was so satisfying to have that happen. And I have 2 happy codas to end this part of my story. Okay, the first happy coda is that in the summer of 2011, I was in Cooperstown. My oldest son was playing baseball, and my agent, same agent, called and said, you're not going to believe this, but the Blue Bistro has hit the New York Times bestseller list 6 years after it was published. Nowadays, that only happens to Colleen Hoover. But it happened to me. Happened to me back then. Just that one week. And the second happy coda is I have found a way to spend every summer at the beach. So, in regard to why do beach books matter, I was asked a question by a reporter. I think she was doing an article for New England Home, and she said, "Who do you write your books for?" And I have a lot of very fancy readers who have beach homes in Nantucket and on the Jersey Shore and in the Outer Banks. And along with their beach stickers and their farm fresh tomatoes, every summer they pick up the new Elin Hilderbrand book, right? But I also have a lot of readers for whom my beach book is their summer. And maybe they're spending the summer in the chemo chair. Maybe they have an aging parent who has Alzheimer's. Maybe they just don't have the time or the resources to take a beach vacation. And for those people, I am their summer. And when the journalist asked me that question, who do you write your beach books for? I thought of the second group, but I also thought of the broken-hearted 17-year-old girl who was folding the Rambo headbands. And I thought to myself, what I needed that summer, if it does not sound too surreal, is I needed an Elin Hilderbrand book to pluck me out of my current circumstances and take me to the beach for the summer. And so I really feel that beach books allow us to escape reality. I'm going to end this part of my little talk with a letter that I received when I was in Tampa back in 2019. It's a well-loved letter. I keep it in my bag. It's, obviously spilled my root beer on it or something. I mean, it's really bad. But I keep it with me because very, very important. This is the kind of thing that keeps me going. And sometimes I cry. And if I cry, I promise you I will recover. I don't want you to freak out or worry. Okay. Dear Ellen, this letter, you probably don't know this, Ellen. You have been with me for the last few years. You were with me on the shores of Anna Maria Island the last weekend I considered myself a single woman. You were there as I grew from girlfriend to stepmom. You were there as I turned a house into a home. You were there for me during my first miscarriage and there for me for the 4 after that. You were there when the doctor told us we should think about other ways to grow our family. And you were there when the doctor came in, dumbfounded, just months after our latest loss, to tell us we were in fact expecting a healthy baby girl. You were there for her first kick. In fact, you felt it when I did, as you were propped up on my belly. And after 14 and a half hours of keeping me company through labor, you were sitting on the counter as our daughter Charlotte Ray took her first breath. You were there with me when postpartum depression claimed more days than I thought would ever happen. You scooped me out of the darkness and laid me on the shores of Nantucket. You see, Ellen, it was you that saved me. I'm going to be fine, you guys, I promise. I've read this letter literally dozens of times. It just really, you carried me to a better world when I couldn't leave my house. You played my heartstrings so well that I couldn't help but begin to talk about your books, eventually joining a book club and becoming myself. Here's to you, Elin Hilderbrand. Thank you for delivering the healing Nantucket air to Florida. Thank you. So this is why beach books matter and why I keep going for a little while longer anyway. And now I want to talk about what you guys want to talk about, because I came to Hoover and I know you guys have questions and topics that you want to cover. And so if we can bring the house lights up just a teensy bit, let's not frighten everyone. but a little bit, then I'm happy to answer your questions. And I know you have questions. I even know what they are, truly. Don't be shy, because I'm in Hoover. Okay, in the back.
Tell us about your relationship with food, because that is one of my favorite parts of your book.
Excellent. So I really became a foodie. It's so interesting. One of the things, this is like a quasi digression, but one of the things I'm asked to do as a writer is something called exclusive content. And what that means is everybody wants book sales, and by which I mean the big retailers. And so I will often have to do little extra essays and extra things for like Barnes & Noble, Target, Costco. They ask for special favors. So Barnes & Noble asked for an essay, a special essay about my eating life. And I finished it. It was due today, and I finished it this morning. And in that essay, which if you buy your books at Barnes & Noble, I'll let you just buy it there and read it. But I talk about my grandmother and growing up in her house, and then I talk about going to Johns Hopkins. And at Hopkins, we only lived in the dorm the first year, and then we all moved into apartments. And I said, some people, you guys don't know what Wawa is, do you? Okay, so Wawa, a lot of people lived on Wawa hot dogs. I learned how to cook, but I did not become a foodie until I moved to Nantucket. And why? I mean, it's because, first of all, there are so many amazing restaurants. And for those of you who have not yet been to Nantucket, you can buy the Hotel Nantucket. It has my entire guidebook in the back that gives you restaurants for literally every occasion. You can't have a bad meal on Nantucket. Everybody cares way too much about food. There's also these amazing markets. So Bartlett Farm and the fish store, 167 Raw, and gourmet markets where you can get the best ingredients. And so I'm sort of 50-50. Like, I cook at home. I love to cook at home. And I love, love, love to go out on Nantucket, especially in the summertime, because it's going to be good. And so organically, because I sort of write about the way things are on Nantucket in the summer, organically food has worked its way into my novels. And I think it started with the Blue Bistro. At that point, I did a lot of research. I interviewed, because I've never worked in a restaurant, and it's very unusual to live on Nantucket and never have worked in a restaurant. So I had to interview people. I got up at 5 a.m. and went and met the pastry chef at American Seasons. And, I sat down with a woman who has owned 4 restaurants on Nantucket at different times and just heard her stories. And as she says, the stories have stories. Lots of really great tales. And then those stories and the culture of really eating well worked its way into my books. And now it's a thing. Anybody else? I know you guys have questions.
What's your favorite pen to write with? Because I know you do all your manuscripts long.
Yes, so that's right. I write longhand, and my favorite pen is Nantucket Bank gives out free blue pens. Dead serious, and I have hundreds, and then they've stopped giving out the pens, I guess, but they just keep them in the back for me, and twice a year I will go and get my stash of blue Nantucket Bank pens. And I've written probably the last 10 novels easily with the blue Nantucket Bank pen. I don't know why, they're just very smooth. Also, I do a lot of writing on the beach or at the pool, and it's very important that I have a ballpoint and not something that will smear. Because I've definitely been caught by the rogue wave and rain and just children standing over me, just dripping. So, have to have something ballpoint for sure. Great question. So rarely am I asked that. Yes?
You are going to retire. What do you plan to do after your retirement?
That's a great question. So I am going to retire in 2024. And the reason is I'm out of ideas, quite frankly. I've written, my 29th book, which is, I think, my -3 for the Virgin Islands and 1 book of stories. So my 25th Nantucket novel is coming out this summer. And, the island is 4 miles wide and 13 miles long. And I've covered every time of year, every possible dramatic situation. I'm just running out of ideas. And so I always say, I'm not retiring for me, I'm retiring for you. I could easily just keep spinning it out and recycling, and I just don't want to do that. It is my enormous desire to go out while the work is still really, really good. And then in answer to your question, what am I going to do after I retire? I'm going to write. I've signed a 2-book deal with my daughter. We are writing 2 books set at boarding school. My daughter goes to boarding school. She goes to St. George's School in Newport, Rhode Island. It is one of the snobbiest, most ridiculously sort of elitist institutions you can possibly imagine. Northeastern New England boarding school. She gets there in the fall of 21, and she's calling me and telling me the stories, and I am like, dude, we have got to write a novel about this. We just can't let this go. So we talked about it over the summer and in the fall, and things just got more and more outrageous that she's telling me about these stories and the things that are happening at the school. And I'm like, we are definitely writing a novel. So I pitched it to my publisher, like, can Shelby and I write a boarding school novel? And they were like, no, you need to write 2. So we have a 2-book deal. They were so into it. So the first book is going to be called The Academy, and it's coming out in the fall of 2024. That will be after she graduates, by the way. Yes, in the corner.
Who are your favorite writers that you like?
That is a wonderful question. So my favorite writers, I tend to read, I read very literary fiction. Probably a lot of the stuff that you guys are reading in your book group. So I think the best writer in the English language right now is Maggie O'Farrell. She wrote Hamnet, if anybody read Hamnet, and she read the Marriage Portrait, and her writing is just absolutely extraordinary. And then aside from Maggie, I read Anna Quinlan, I read Richard Russo I love, and I just tend to read really, really the best books I can get my hands on. So last year, I loved Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. That was one of my favorites. And The Marriage Portrait. And then what else did I should always keep a list. I will come back to you. But if you follow me on Instagram, any book that I really love, I will post on my Instagram. If you see my name on the cover of somebody else's book, you never really know for sure. Was that a favor she was doing someone, or did she really love it? But if I post about it on my Instagram, I absolutely, positively love it, and I will rave about it. And I probably just gave away an industry secret there, and I'm sorry. Should always be wary of the blurb.
There's one over there. There's a left.
Okay, oh, wait. Raise your wave. Okay, yes, I see you. Hi.
Do you prepare an outline when you start a new book?
Do I prepare an outline when I start a new book? Not really, so I never really know. I'm about to start work next week on my very last Nantucket summer novel. And I really don't know what's going to happen in it. I have a vague idea. So I probably will write some notes, what will happen, who are the characters. I keep notes, an ongoing list of notes in my phone. But as for a giant outline, no, because what I do is I get my characters and then I dive into a scene and we're off and running. But I often don't know what's coming next. I always like to let it unfold organically, which is really what keeps me up late at night. I feel like if I had an outline, I would know better. But if I had an outline, it wouldn't flow, I think, the way that you guys expect it to sort of flow and unfold. So it has to come from the characters. It can't come from me imposing a structure on it, if that makes sense. Yes?
Tell us about your writing habits. Do you write every day or at the same time every day, or?
Yeah, I don't. So I write every day. I'm constantly working. I try not to keep myself to any kind of program because I feel like that's also a way you make yourself crazy. So I don't have a word count. I don't have a number of hours. I'm just very disciplined. So when I can write, I will write. In a perfect world, in a perfect day, I will sit down. I do my exercising in the morning, and that's the discipline that sets up my day. I exercise every single morning. And then when I'm done exercising, I will sit down, and a perfect day would be like 11 to 6. You only need to compose 3 hours a day in order to write 2 books a year. So the goal is always getting 3 hours of composing a day. I have a bunch of children who are late teens, early 20s, and they take up so much of my time. Why? Why do they're adults. Like, why do they take up so much of my time? I don't know. You know, my daughter at boarding school is going to Harbor Island with her friends on the 12th of March, and we find out today her passport's expired. So, I mean, that takes to deal with that takes a ton of time. It's like, oh my gosh, there goes 3 hours of my afternoon. But in a perfect world, 3 hours of composing. And if I'm out by my pool, or if I'm sitting in my chaise and I have the entire day to myself and I can get the 3 hours of composing done, I also read during my workday, I take a nap, and I have my lunch. But it's okay because I give myself 7 hours to get 3 hours worth of work done. So that almost always works out. Yes?
Which of your characters do you most identify with?
The character that I most identify with, I believe, is Margaret Quinn of the Winter Street series. So for those of you who haven't read my Winter Street series, it's my holiday series. And the way it came about is as follows. In the summer of 2013, my publisher called and said, we've had a holiday book fall off our list. Can you write a Christmas book in 4 weeks? And I said, no, absolutely not. I was writing my novel, The Matchmaker, which was this very emotionally engaging book, and I didn't want to get distracted. And I said, no, I'm not going to write a Christmas book in 4 weeks. I said, but when I finish The Matchmaker, I would love to write a Christmas book. And so I pitched them an idea, not only for a Christmas book, but a Christmas trilogy. And they were like, no, we really only wanted one book. And, you're more known for summer, and I just, we're not going to commit to a Christmas trilogy. So I said, okay, fine. So I gave them one Christmas book, Winter Street, and I intentionally gave it no ending. And then, miraculously, they gave me a 2-book deal for the next 2. Winter, what was second? Winter Stroll and Winter Storms. And then, more ironically, in the summer of 2016, my editor called and she said, what do I have to do to get you to write a 4th Christmas book? I'm like, oh, who's laughing now? It's me, haha. So I ended up writing a 4th Christmas book. And in addition to that, I made them give me a contract for the Paradise series. And they didn't want to give me a contract for the Paradise series because they said, you're a Nantucket writer. I don't think you should switch islands. And I said, the Paradise series has way outsold. I mean, their wildest dreams at way, way, way outsold. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing. See, now just listen to me. But in the Winter Street series, and it's easy to say she's my favorite because I've been with her for 4 books. Margaret Quinn is the mother, and Kelly Quinn is the man. He's the patriarch, and he's married to Mitzi. Mitzi's his second wife. His first wife is Margaret. She is the anchor of the CBS Evening News. She has really focused on her career and let Kelly take their kids up to Nantucket to run the inn. And she has a lot of guilt about that. And at the time that I was writing it, I had just split from my husband, and I was away from the kids in the Christmas of 2013. I was in Hawaii, and Chip took the kids to Dubai. We were like opposite sides of the planet. And it was really, really hard on me. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to put a single mom whose career is very important to her. I'm going to put her in this book, and I'm going to make her the hero. And for those of you who have read, and that was just to make myself feel better, but for those of you who have read the Winter Street series, Margaret Quinn is an absolute hero. And so I would say she's my favorite. Yes?
I want to ask you about characters that are unlike you. I love 28 Summers, but the woman running for political office seemed very unlike, opposite. She was the opposite of each woman. And so I'm curious about how you might have drawn on that. And then also the identicals. I thought you did a great job of bringing in people of different races. I think you had a male character who was black. And I'm just curious, when you're writing about people so different, how do you approach that?
Well, one of the ways that you do it is I have a talent, every writer does, of being able to put yourself in other people's shoes. And a lot of that comes from reading, a lot of that comes from listening, and a lot of that just comes from a natural empathy. In the case of Ursula in 28 Summers, Ursula and I actually have a fair amount in common in just that, like, Ursula is a very ambitious woman, and she was getting it done, and she, it did come off, I think, a little bit unlikable. And you follow me here, she had to be a little bit unlikable because, of course, she's playing foil to our main character, Mallory. So you didn't want to be in love with Ursula. You really didn't want to be in love with Ursula because that would have caused all kinds of problems. But it's part of being a writer is being a psychologist, right? And being a therapist and listening to people, but really like listening and trying to get it. And then once you get it, then you can sort of put yourself in other people's shoes. And, my work could stand to be a lot more diverse. And it has, like, as the sort of national consciousness has changed about diversity and inclusivity, like, I have tried to ride that wave because it is very important to me that people from all different backgrounds can read my books and see themselves or, see representation. And so it's super important for me now, especially, to incorporate, diversity and inclusivity. And you'll see that in my novel that's coming out this summer. I was very conscious of that. And also the Gen Z sensibility. So, my daughter is aggressively Gen Z. She's just so, and I'm Gen X. And it's a different language and it's a different worldview. And she and I are very, very close. And I listen to her and I watch her and I look at the things that she's consuming. And, Gen Z is that generation that grew up on their phones. And it's so, so different from us. And, we would eat cereal in front of the Brady Bunch and there were 3 channels. You guys remember that, right? I mean, we all went and saw 16 Candles. I mean, Molly Ringwald. I mean, we didn't have the wide choices. And so, I think it's really just observing the way things are now and trying to, like, keep up and keep relevant. Yes.
I've always been a big advocate on journaling, keeping a diary as a young girl, as a daily journal. With all the writing that you do that as well?
So the question is about journaling. No, not even. I don't have time. And it's sad because I'm like, what happened? What happened? But it's so funny because today, I wrote a novel called The Castaways in 2010, which means I would have written it in 2009, which means my oldest son, who's now 23, would have been 9 years old, 8 or 9. And I'm reading it now because I'm using some of the characters in the book that I'm going to start. And I can remember, I don't even know what happens at the end of the book. Like, I'm riveted because I'm like, how does this end? I haven't read it in 14 or 15 years. I literally do not know how it ends. But when I'm reading it, I recognize the person, like the things about having little kids that you've completely forgotten. So in some sense, the novels that I've written are going to have to serve as my journals because I never, ever had another spare second raising those kids and writing 2 books a year or 1 book a year to write about my own life. And so it is all gone. I can't remember a single thing. But I would definitely encourage you, if you would like to remember your life, to journal. Otherwise, you guys definitely feel like that sensation of like every day is the same. Every day is the same. Like, what makes today different? And if you journal though, and you put down the very specific things about the day, then you will remember. Yes.
Do you have a significance to the names you give your characters? For example, Richard Decameron. Why?
So I have a hard time, right? Because I've written a bunch of books, so I just finished my 29th novel. And they're all really populated. So imagine how challenging that is. I have to come up with different names, first and last names, for all these people. And it's really, really hard. One of the greatest things that's happened to me in the last 12 months is my son graduated from the University of South Carolina. And I go to the graduation, and they hand me a program with 17,000 names in it. And I'm like, I am taking this baby home. And it sits, I kid you not, on my writing desk. It sits on my writing desk. I mix and match, I mix and match. So many last names I never even thought to use. I'm like, this is such a great name. And I circle them and I use them, and I used them in the book that's coming out this June. And that is how, it is hard. First names are a little bit easier, but the last names, so hard. But it's okay, because now I have the Gamecock manual, which I am going to be using. Anybody else have questions? I can take like one or two more, I think. Nobody's asked the big question. I can't believe it. Yes?
So which of your books means the most to you and why?
Which of my books means the most to me and why? I would have to say, which of my books means the most to me and why? I think the novel that means the most to me is Golden Girl. And that book came out in 2021, and it's dedicated to my children. And it's about a writer on Nantucket, a beach novelist on Nantucket, who is killed in a hit and run. She's jogging. She gets killed in a hit and run accident. And she ascends to the beyond, and she watches everything that happens below. She's assigned an administrator named Martha. Martha says that was really unfair. And because it was so unfair, I'm going to let you watch what happens below for the summer, and I'm going to give you the use of 3 nudges, and you can change the outcome down below. So the way I got the idea for this, which you already know because I've talked, is that my father died when I was 16. And I've always felt his hand on my back. So I've always sort of believed that people, the important people in our lives that we've lost, can see us and are cheering for us and possibly even making things go a certain way. And then the other way that novel came about is that I had breast cancer in 2014. And I had a double mastectomy. It was all very public because I went on the CBS This Morning with Gayle King and talked about it. I had a double mastectomy, and then I was reconstructed. And at some point during my reconstruction, I got MRSA. And the story is very long. I won't tell the whole thing, but I got MRSA and almost died, and was flown in a helicopter. They said I was so sick that I was on Nantucket. Nantucket's a country hospital, a rural hospital, they call it. And I was so sick, they said, we have to put you on the helicopter. We've got to fly you to Boston. And they said, and you should say goodbye to your children before you leave. I was very, very sick, you guys. I was dying. And so I said, okay. So I had a friend go get the kids pulled them out of school. They came to the hospital room. I said, I'm not sure what's going to happen here, but I can tell you one thing. I will never leave you. I will never leave you. And I wasn't even sure what I meant by that. But what I meant was, I will forever be looking down on you, moving you like chess pieces. And that's that. So I think out of all of my novels, I think that is probably the one that is the most personal to me. And it also has a lot of really great insights about what it's like to be a writer. Anyway, anybody else have a question? Nobody asked about Hollywood, and I can't believe it. Does anyone want to know? Oh, okay. So, I only bring it up. Normally, I avoid that. I used it for years, just avoided that question like the plague, because nothing was ever happening. But finally, in 2023, The Perfect Couple has been given the green light by Netflix for a 6-part limited series. And they are going to start shooting I talked to the line producer today. They're going to start shooting April 3rd. And it's being directed by a woman named Suzanne Bier. She directed The Undoing, if anybody saw The Undoing, and The Night Manager. And she's very fancy, and it's going to be presumably going to be very elevated, very expensive, and Netflix is spending a lot of money, which is what we want, right? We want it to be done. Nantucket has not been done correctly in TV or in the movies yet, and this is our chance. And so that will be out. It's going to film this spring, and I presume it will be out in the summer of 2024. And you can follow me on Instagram, and I will tell you all of the exciting. I know the cast. I know some of the casting. I can't tell you because the deals haven't closed yet. I know, like another week, and I would have been able to tell you. But very exciting. And And I have a bunch of other things that are in development, but it's, as I always say, Hollywood is a very cruel mistress. So we have to wait and see what happens. I think I have 5 other projects in development, but that is just hit or miss because I've had at least 3 go and just sit on ice. So it's hit or miss definitely for that. But I want to say thank you. You guys have been absolutely amazing. I'm going to sign and take pictures and make all your Hilderbrand dreams come true upstairs. And thank you so, so much.